Welcome everyone to Gamer Melt. As many of you know, AMD just released their Ryzen 5000 series of CPUs, and I was lucky enough to get a couple samples from AMD, so thanks for that. Oh, and if you're looking to purchase a Ryzen 5000 CPU, I'll have affiliate links in the description below. Anyway, the new processors bring with them even more performance, and that's thanks to a very nice IPC increase, but more relevant to this video is higher clocks. See, since the original announcement of AMD's last-gen Ryzen 3000 CPUs, the idea of getting a Ryzen CPU to 5GHz seemed like a very real possibility. I mean, the 3900X already got to 4.6GHz stock. And yes, clocks really aren't that important. The architecture is the most important part, but it's a milestone. And with Zen 2's already fantastic IPC, 5GHz would have been that extra icing on the cake. Well, when we actually got them, those hopes were quickly dashed. Getting much of an overclock at all was tough, and it quickly sent temps skyrocketing. Many gamers even had issues getting them to their rated boost clock. Then AMD put a big asterisk next to Ryzen 3000's boost clock, and it became apparent that 5GHz was never going to happen. Fast forward to last month, and Ryzen 5000 is announced to come with up to 4.9GHz. 4.9! That moment started my quest to get Ryzen to 5GHz. And of course, I don't mean while using any kind of crazy cooling method like liquid nitrogen or any super expensive coolers. Not even a custom water cooling loop. My test bench just has a decent all-in-one cooler. So once I got my review units, you'd better believe the first thing I did was clock the main core to 5GHz. See, one interesting feature of Ryzen Master is that it not only shows you the best cores in your particular CPU, but it also shows you the cores Microsoft prefers to use. As you can see, the first core here is the favorite of both, so I figured I would try to overclock this one. And, well, I actually did complete it, but when I later went to record, it crashed. Luckily, when I lowered the clocks on the other cores a bit, we had success. Try that with any Ryzen 3000 CPU and your computer won't be happy. In fact, when we look, the 5900X's out-of-the-box settings already have it set to a maximum of 4900 MHz, but it doesn't actually get to it, right? The 5900X only has a rated boost of 4.8 GHz, so it definitely can't get to 4.9 when set to default settings. Actually, it can. It even gets higher at default without much effort. Basically, it looks like AMD learned their lesson with Ryzen 3000. Instead of promising what's essentially the absolute limit of the processor's clock, they're underselling it. That likely explains why the 5950X is only rated to 4.9 GHz. AMD didn't want to overpromise too much, but while I don't have the 5950X, I'd bet it gets to 5 GHz with ease. So, after I got it to 5 GHz easily, it was time to really test things out. For one, you'll notice that I have the voltage pretty high. But one good thing about Ryzen Master is that the voltage overclock is just the maximum allowed. So it doesn't mean the voltage is stuck at that level, and Ryzen can get fairly high voltages when in default anyway. Regardless, after this I tried to get it up to 5025 MHz. From here, unfortunately I did get a crash fairly quickly, but I had one other idea. See, the way Ryzen Master handles per-core overclocking is at a per-chiplet maximum allowed frequency, meaning when you overclock one core to a maximum that's higher than the rest, the others can get higher than what you set. It almost seems arbitrary how they get to the max for the rest, but they can definitely go higher than what you intend. One way to help this is to disable cores. So I disabled all but one core on each CCX, which is the bare minimum AMD requires. And when I did this, I was able to get the single core score of the 5900X up to a whopping 5100 MHz and could still run the Ryzen Master test. Of course, there are better stability tests, but this is a decent way to do it quickly and test your final overclock with something else. Anyway, I could ultimately save it at 5125 MHz, but it ultimately crashed during the test. Now, when it comes to actual performance beyond 5 GHz, because there's still 2 cores, Windows will bounce back and forth some. To overcome this, I had to overclock both cores to 5 GHz, and when I did that, you can see I got a little upgrade over the default 5900X setting. Of course, I don't suggest disabling cores or anything. This was just a way to get the best overclock I could with a simple AIO cooler. Now, from here, I decided to throw in my Ryzen 7 5800X because unlike the 12-core 5900X, the 5800X only has a single core chiplet, meaning all the cores are on one chiplet. There's still an I/O die, so it's not completely monolithic, but I figured it could help with the clocks. Well, it did handle the single-core 5GHz overclock in the Ryzen master test, but it crashed during Cinebench. That ultimately led me to believe that it's very similar to the 5900X before I turned the clocks down. Of course, the Silicon Lottery may favor you better. In the end, AMD's Ryzen 5000 series of CPUs have far better clocks and have finally reached the 5GHz milestone. And unlike the 3000 parts, AMD didn't overstate the possible clocks. Your CPU should definitely get rated boost clocks and then some, with ease. So while that does it for today, let me know what your best Ryzen 5000 clocks are down in the comments below. And if you liked the video, please subscribe. And as always, have a great day!